In the last lesson, we learned how to block unwanted light with flags. In this lesson, we're going to block light with gobos to create unique shadows like this. Gobo stands for Go Between Object, and in surface-based photography, a gobo is any object, panel, or shape that you place between your light source and your subject to create distinct shadows of that shape. We're also going to learn where to position our light for the best effect. Gobo lighting isn't something you have to do, but it's a great way to add visual interest and decrease your styling efforts. Almost anything that creates an interesting shadow can be used as a gobo. You can either buy an object like a plastic leaf, or you can make your own from cardstock or construction paper. If you're making your own gobos, simply cut out a design you want to try and clamp it to a light stand like this. Light stands are inexpensive, and you can usually use the same one you use to hold a 5-in-1 reflector. Alternatively, you or a friend can just hold the gobo. Just know that the shadows may not be as crisp due to the natural motion of your hands when you're holding something. Here's the effect you can get with multiple types of leaf. Great options are palm, monstera, and eucalyptus leaves. With stems that have multiple leaves on them like eucalyptus, hold multiple strands together to create the effect of light shining through a tree. You can clamp these to your stand, you can have a friend hold them, or you can put your camera on a tripod, set the timer, and hold it yourself. When making gobos, windows are my favorite. Here are 3 window shapes to try: squares, squares with an arch, and slats. Because you're just cutting paper, don't be afraid to try different sizes and style of opening to see what you like. Once you've chosen your gobo, you need to decide whether you want the shadow to be soft or hard. This will depend on a couple things. First is your distance between the gobo and your subject. The farther the gobo is from your subject, the softer the shadow. This is because the shadow gets spread out more before it lands on your surfaces. The closer you place the gobo, the harder and more defined the shadow. I'll put them side by side so you can really see the difference a little distance makes. The second thing is the size of your light source. If you're using a small, undiffused light source like a window without a curtain, your shadows will be harder and more defined. If you're using a big softbox, your shadows will be a lot softer, and it may be hard to create the definition you want. You can solve this by removing the diffuser from your softbox and shooting with a bare bulb. The last thing to consider is where you want the shadows to land. For shadows on your horizontal surface, place your light and gobo along the side. Here's an example using a small, undiffused artificial light. The light and gobo are along the side, so the shadow projects downward. For shadows on your vertical surface, aim your light at one of the front corners like this. Place your gobo in the path of the light like this. I'll put them side by side so you can see the difference in light and gobo position. Since every light source in gobo is different, you'll learn the most by experimenting with different distances between your light and gobo, and between your gobo and your scene. Also, experiment with hardening and softening your light and note what happens to the shadow. The more you practice, the more you'll internalize what happens when you make a change, so you won't even need to think about it anymore. So let's try gobo lighting yourself and see if you want to make it part of your photo formula. Here are your action items. Create or order at least 3 different gobos. Cut them from paper or order any objects like plastic leaves you want to try. Determine whether you prefer hard or soft gobo shadows by adding and removing diffusion from your light. Determine the optimal distance between your gobo and your subject. Remember that the closer the gobo is to your subject, the harder the shadow will be. Determine the optimal distance between your light source and your gobo. Take a photo every time you change a distance and really analyze what's happening to the shadows in terms of hardness and size. For more details and advice on each of these action items, refer to your workbook.